Chapter 23 continued. After all, journaling was practically a national pastime. Every school-aged child had a journal of some sort. My sweet Annie got a new one every year, and she was hard-pressed not to fill each page before the year was ended. Dreams, thoughts, ideas, events of the day, triumphs, perceived wrongs, broken hearts, all of these things could be and would be captured in the pages of a journal. I believe there is an innate desire to have a place where the innermost secrets of the heart can be safely shared. When a confidant is lacking, and sometimes even when one exists, it is natural to write down those secrets, especially those things which are too frightening or too dark to share with another living soul. I believe you may be onto something, Sir Happy, I said. The depression in the velvet is the perfect size for such a journal as you described. One might assume it to be journal more so than a box, considering the other items which surround the void. Devlin seems to have lived a solitary life, and so a journal would be a natural outlet to express frustrations and inner thoughts. Sir Happy seemed exceedingly relieved as I acknowledged the merit in what he had just shared, but the giant and unavoidable question was, where do we go from here? You know, Sir Happy, I said hesitantly, if such a journal existed, there is a chance Devlin has already destroyed it, and therefore any evidence which might be damning to him. Sir Happy was quick to reply, I think not, Marmee. There has not been enough time for Devlin to gain the courage to part with all of his memories. It matters not if the memories are bitter or sweet or somewhere in between. We tend to hold on to them, good or bad. Besides, if this young man is connected in some way to these crimes, he would want to remember them, and in so doing, relive the moment of each one in some way or another. What better way than to write them down in vivid detail? None of the victims reported having anything taken from the person, so this would be his only memento to mark the occasion of the attacks and the murder. It is incredibly disturbing to think anyone could be so dark-natured as to chronicle such deeds, I said. These attacks have been disturbing in their own right, have they not? Sir Happy replied. Think about Mr. Snuffles, dear mistress. There was no provocation for her attack, and yet she was a victim. What kind of a dark soul do you think would do such a thing to an innocent girl? Think about my Stephen. Writing down the events of each attack would be no more sinister in the mind of such a man as actually perpetrating the crimes would be. He might even consider it a tribute of sorts. There was no denying it. Only the most despicable person would have brought such evil upon another human being, and considering the number of victims and the escalation of the violence associated with the crimes, there would be no end to the attacks. I felt certain if we did not prove beyond a shadow of a doubt who was behind these attacks, more deaths would follow, with each one more gruesome than the last. If there was even the slightest chance of Devlin being involved, and perhaps even writing about the crimes themselves, we owed it to his victims, both past and future, to at least attempt to locate the journal. We had best find it fast, then, I said, before our criminal decides it is better to destroy his record and start again than to be caught and denied more prey. Well said, Sir Happy said, and then grew silent. You know, Marmee, he began after several moments in deep thought, sometimes the best place to hide something you do not want found is to hide it in plain sight. Suppose for a moment a person murders someone by stabbing them to death. Would it not make sense to place the knife in the kitchen, out in plain view, say perhaps on a butcher's block where meat was prepared? The authorities, if they were to search the home, might overlook the knife because it was not hidden and because of where it was located. One expects to find a knife in a kitchen, but not, say, in a bathroom or a bedchamber. Does it make sense? Actually, it does, I replied. So what you are saying is, if Devlin were to relocate this journal of his after Stephen discovering it, he would use a hiding place where it would blend in, where it would make sense for a book to be. Exactly, Sir Happy exclaimed. And where better to hide a fancy journal than in a vast library full of thousands of books? No one would ever expect to find it there. It is in plain view of the world and accessible to everyone. It would be the last place anyone would ever look for it. Then we must return to the library, I declared. I stopped Sir Happy as we turned toward the door and asked, how in all of Christendom do you expect to find one single book in the midst of so many? Sir Happy looked me straight in the eye and replied, we will search the entire library, one book at a time, if necessary. Besides, I believe Devlin's own steps will guide us to what we seek. So be it, then, I said, with as much conviction as I could muster. However, the task seemed insurmountable to me. Even if we could somehow communicate to Hiram and Charles what we were looking for, and then request their assistance in finding it, it would take us weeks to pore through the thousands of volumes contained within the vast library. We had neither the time nor the resources to accomplish such a task. And if the journal was indeed there, it would be so easy to overlook it simply because there were so many volumes in one location. I knew it was too much to hope that the binding was marked in very large print with Devlin Pierrepont's secret journal, and yet I held out for just such a turn of fortune. What is wrong, Mommy? Sir Happy stopped and asked. Why the hesitation? I considered keeping my concerns wholly to myself, but I knew Sir Happy would know there was something lurking beneath the surface in me, and I did not want him to believe I doubted his ability. It is only there are so many books, Sir Happy, and we are already under a tremendous amount of pressure, I said. I fear we have little chance of success in our task. Neither you nor I can reach the majority of the shelves on our own. We have no way to communicate to Hiram and Charles what we are looking for, but even if we did, there is still a chance we won't find what we are seeking. Sometimes, Mommy, you have to have faith that good will prevail, Sir Happy replied. I know there are times when it feels as though evil has all of the advantage, but you must believe we have something to keep things in balance. Evil only prevails when good men stand by and do nothing. Besides, you were the one who said I should believe in myself and my abilities. I have faith we will find what we are looking for. Now, let us see if we can gain any support in our efforts. Sir Happy ran out the door, with me only a few paces behind him. Sir Happy was right in so many ways. We could not stand by and do nothing just because the odds seemed against us. We had to give it our best effort for the sake of justice and for the sake of the victims. Chapter 24. As I raced out into the hallway, I saw Sir Happy barking at Lord Pierrepont's chamber door in an attempt to summon Hiram and Charles. It of course worked because, as I said before, it is very difficult to ignore Sir Happy's barks once he gets started. I heard Officer Lestrade complain, "What is it now? I cannot stand the barking. Make that mutt be quiet." "Don't worry, Hiram," Charles said. "I will go see what the commotion is all about." Within moments, Charles was standing at the door, smiling at us as though we shared some secret jest. "What is it, you two?" he asked. Of everyone involved in this adventure, Charles seemed the least anxiety-ridden. His confidence lay in the expertise of Hiram and Sir Happy, both of whom he trusted immensely. There seemed to be no doubt in his mind that between the two of these driven detectives, the truth of the matter would come out. Part of me wished we all could share in this certainty. Once Sir Happy realized he had the attention of one of his human companions, he increased the level and forcefulness of his communication. "Follow me," he barked, and raced to the top of the stairs. He paused just long enough to see if Charles was following him. When he saw our friend still standing at the door, he raced back and repeated his efforts. After several rounds of barking, running to the stairs, and then returning, Charles finally got the message. "I think Sir Happy wants us to follow him downstairs," Charles yelled to Hiram, who was busy doing God only knows what in the other room. "Why?" was the only reply Hiram gave. "How should I know?" Charles retorted. "I only know he wants us to go back downstairs." There was no reply from Hiram. "Well, are you coming or not, Hiram?" Charles demanded. Charles didn't need any other explanation beyond the fact Sir Happy wanted us to follow, and it seemed a good enough reason for him. I heard quite a bit of grumbling coming from inside the room, and it was coarse enough language. I shall not repeat the content of the complaint. Let it be enough for the listener to know Hiram was none too pleased by the interruption or the new demand. "We haven't time for this, Charles," Hiram said from just inside the door. His voice was low but harsh, and I knew he was very near losing his temper. "These men are chomping at the bit in here, and I have been threatened with every sort of trouble imaginable, from the loss of my position as an inspector to having charges brought against me for harassment and causing grievous mental anguish. Lord Jeremy has even threatened me with the asylum because he believes I'm a lunatic for being guided by the efforts of a dog." Charles just stared at Hiram as though he was waiting for something a little more earth-shattering to come from his mouth. Sir Happy, for his part, had not stopped his trips back and forth between the doorway where we all stood and the top of the stairs. That is, until he became winded from his exertion. He stopped for a moment to catch his breath, and I believe to decide what his next move would be. "Mommy," Sir Happy said finally, still panting from his efforts, "I can wait no longer. Either Hiram will follow or he won't. I know what I'm looking for now, Mommy, old boy, and I believe I know how I can find it. Are you coming?" "I shall be along shortly, old chap," I said. "I simply wish to try one more time to convince Hiram to come with us. I have no doubts Charles will be with me when I come down." "Suit yourself, Mommy," Sir Happy replied, "but don't wait too long. We have a lot of ground to cover and little time in which to do it. You know where I will be," he said, and he raced down the stairs to the library. Charles chuckled at the departure of our friend. "It appears as though Sir Happy got tired of waiting for you to make up your mind," he said. Hiram looked a bit miffed. "Make up my mind about what?" Hiram asked. "About what kind of man you're going to be," Charles replied. "Now what is that supposed to mean, Charles?" Hiram asked. "It means, my friend, you are standing at the brink of one of those critical moments in life when you get to define who you are by the decisions you make and the resulting actions you take," Charles said. "You and I know the truth about these two very remarkable creatures. It is a new discovery, mind you, but one that is as miraculous as it is unmistakable. When there were no pressures from the outside world, and it was just you standing face to face with our brilliant canine detective, you were willing to put everything on the line to follow what you knew to be the truth regarding the Pierrepont household. Now you are under pressure from the men you suspect of evil, and you are beginning to deny the validity of what you knew to be the truth just this morning." "And what truth are you referring to?" Hiram asked. "You need that little dog down there," Charles replied. "With all of his quirks, and with all of the uncertainty which comes trying to communicate with him, you need him. He's probably the most perceptive and most trustworthy colleague you will ever have the honor of working with. He also happens to be a very good judge of character, Hiram, and he has used the same judgment to call you friend. Now, you have to decide whether or not you're worthy of the title." Hiram looked every bit as miserable as a child who has wounded his very best friend. "I know you're right, Charles," Hiram said, "but these men could ruin me, or at least ensure I never advance beyond my current rank. I could lose all credibility." I could see the uncertainty in Hiram's eyes and the tremendous conflict raging within his heart. Charles put his hand on Hiram's shoulder and said, "I understand more than you know, my friend. For most of my early life, I endeavored to have men think well of me. I was never wealthy, but my mother, who had been a governess to some of the finest families in London, ensured I had as good an education as she could offer. Because of such a noble education, I was able to interact with the upper class in ways few men of small means could ever hope to. I played whatever part I had to play to obtain the good opinion of men like Jeremy Pierpont. In fact, I numbered several noblemen among my list of friends, believing any one of them would come to my aid were the need to arise. When my family hit really hard times, my so-called friends vanished, unwilling to help a young man whom they deemed beneath them. Their opinion of me had not changed, but my understanding of them had. Those men of consequence had always seen me as inferior, but I was for a time an amusement to them. As I played my part, they played theirs, and the game continued till I had no strength left in me to be something I wasn't. To fall from their false grace was the greatest gift I could have received. I met Amelia during my time of struggle, and I discovered who I really was. I learned what was most important in life, what was real. Amelia and I have since battled through tremendous hardship, often standing on the brink of starvation. But I can honestly say I was never happier than I was with her, because I had what really mattered in life. What I'm saying, Hiram, is the most important opinion you can have is the one you have of yourself. It does not matter what anyone else thinks of you, as long as when you look in the mirror, you can respect and like the person who's looking back at you. Do not give your fears the power to rule your heart or your decisions. Be led by what you know to be the truth. Trust only those souls who have proven themselves worthy of your trust. Oh, and just so you know, Stephen, and you taught me what it meant to be a real friend. Friendship is without condition. Your true friends will love you no matter what, even when you're acting in an extremely unlovable fashion. They will stand with you even when the world turns its back on you. It is unconditional. Hiram stood there for a moment, absorbing every bit of wisdom Charles had just shared. His face transformed from a look of frustration into an expression of understanding. Hiram had made his choice. At some point in our lives, we all are granted the same choice. We can either follow the whims of the world and allow ourselves to be tossed about by its ever-changing mood, like a ship is tossed about by an angry sea, or we can define ourselves based on honorable truths and know who we are regardless of the pressures of the world. At that critical moment, Hiram chose to be true to himself and to those who had earned his trust. He looked down at me and smiled. "So, what do you think, old man?" Hiram asked me. I looked at Hiram and then in the direction of the stairs. "I assume you know where Sir Happy went then?" Hiram said. I purred that I did. "Then you shall be our guide," Hiram replied. Turning to Charles, he continued, "Thank you, Charles. Your honesty and courage you showed in speaking your piece has helped guide me to a decision. Come what may, I shall remain true to those who have earned my trust and have proven themselves worthy of my support. I shall not forget this day, my friend. Now,
If you will grant me one more moment, I shall collect the motley bunch in the other room and follow you to wherever Sir Happy went.
Within moments, Hiram had returned with the band of degenerates, all of them grumbling and complaining like a troop of fussy children ready for their afternoon nap. The Frenchman insisted he and the magistrate were being treated like criminals. The magistrate complained he was seriously fatigued from the constant activity. Lord Jeremy perpetually threatened ruin upon everyone involved with the investigation, and Devlin, who had remained silent up to this point, mumbled he was tired of the game of hide and seek. Even Humphreys remarked he had much to do in the household and could not afford to waste any more time gallivanting from room to room as though they were on a tour of the mansion. Hiram's booming voice broke through the din as he yelled,
Enough! I've heard as much of your complaints and your threats as I'm going to allow. The next person who speaks outside of answering a direct question from me or my colleagues, he said, pointing to Charles and me, will receive a severe flogging from me. Consequences be damned.
Hiram's message rang loud and clear because not a soul said another word.
Now, Mommy, Hiram said, turning to me, we have a bit of a logistics problem, since we have so many people, and you are the only one who knows where we are going. Do you think you can negotiate Devlin's lift if we all cram into it?
Feeling quite certain I could, I nodded my head.
Good. Then we are off to the lift, said Hiram.
Devlin began to protest, reiterating the point he had made previously that only 2 other people could squeeze into the lift along with his chair. Hiram ended the argument by saying,
I am quite certain your lift will manage the lot of us this once.
It was a tight squeeze, to be certain, and I had my doubts concerning the amount of weight the lift was designed to bear. The metal gears groaned beneath our combined weight as we endeavored to wedge everyone inside the confined space. I was certain if none of us had suffered from claustrophobia prior to this experience, we would all be its victims once it was over. I was forced to sit on Devlin's lap to make room for the others and to enable me to reach the handle which controlled the contraption's up and down movements. It was extremely disquieting and indeed a bit creepy to be in such close contact with a young man who most likely was responsible for some of the most grisly attacks London had ever seen. Try as I might to imagine, I was sitting on the lap of a dear friend. I could not contain the shivers which coursed through my person. Your cat is either cold or scared, Inspector, said Devlin as he shifted in his wheeled chair. He won't stop shaking. I resented the implication. He made me sound weak and inferior, which I truly did not appreciate coming from the likes of him. I extended my claws ever so slightly until they had sunk through Devlin's blanket, past the layer of his pant material, and into his skin. The beast just poked me, Devlin yelled in protest as he squirmed beneath the pressure of my claws. I could not help but notice, as Devlin fidgeted beneath me, he had remarkably strong leg muscles for someone in his condition. When I first acquired my perch, I had half expected Devlin's legs to feel frail and spindly, as is common with people who have been crippled all their lives. But his legs were anything but frail and spindly. They were firm and well-formed, as was the rest of his person, as I have mentioned before. I attributed his unexpected strength to whatever specialized medical care he might have received as his body was developing. It was a reminder to me of how very different things were for families with money compared to those without, and what an advantage wealth gave to those blessed with it. I felt certain Devlin must have received excellent care since childhood, which enabled him to develop his muscles more normally. When compared to a less affluent person with the same affliction as his, whose parents could not afford to bring their child to specialists trained in mobility and the human skeletal/muscular system, he fared far better. Devlin had flourished under the care and was apparently spared the more pronounced deformities associated with his particular disease, whatever it might be.
Well, old man, we are waiting on you to take us to our destination,
Hiram said, once we were all inside the lift and the door was closed. I wanted to remind my friend I had never used a lift before, and therefore did not know exactly how the mechanism worked or where the handle should be placed precisely to bring us to the grand library. I only knew when the handle was pushed up earlier, it had brought us to the top level of the mansion, so I assumed pushing the handle down would bring us back to where we had started, or at least it is what I hoped. I remembered the approximate position the handle had been in when we first were introduced to this questionable mechanical invention. So using my recollection as my guide, I gingerly applied my weight to the handle until it was again in the appropriate starting position. The ride down was more jolting than the ride up had been, but we eventually made it back to the library level, where we were greeted by our dear friend, Sir Happy.
Well done, Mommy, old boy. You really came through,
Sir Happy exclaimed as we all piled out of the lift.
I heard this terrible groaning coming from overhead, and was a little afraid the whole place was going to come crashing down upon me. I am much relieved to know it was only you.
Sir Happy gave me a playful poke in the ribs, to which I made my best attempt to wallop him with my paw. Unfortunately, I was not fast enough, because I missed and looked rather foolish in the process.
In all seriousness, Mommy, I'm very glad to see you. The search will go much more quickly with you here to help.
I brought some reinforcements as well, my friend, I said, pointing in the direction of Hiram and Charles. I thought we could use the extra hands. Hiram made his way over to where Sir Happy and I were conversing, and crouched down so he could speak to Sir Happy face to face.
I must apologize for my behavior upstairs, Sir Happy. I feel as though I let you down when you really needed my support and my confidence the most. I was not a very faithful friend to you in Devlin's room, and I am sorry. Is there any way you might forgive me and allow us to start anew?
In perfect canine fashion, Sir Happy licked Hiram on the end of the nose. To my knowledge, this was and continues to be the universally accepted gesture of,
I forgive you, and we are still friends.
Hiram laughed and gave Sir Happy an affectionate scratch behind the ears.
Now that my behavior is forgiven, let us be about this search, shall we?
Hiram said, having been restored to his normal self again.
I haven't the slightest clue what we are looking for, but I have complete faith we shall find it before the day is through.
Turning toward the rest of the group, Hiram said,
Please, if you wouldn't mind, have a seat on those comfortable sofas over there while our lead investigator performs his search.
The two Pierreponts, Magistrate Peavy, Lestrand, and Humphreys, were shuffled off to a central collection of seating, but not before Magistrate Peavy had the chance to exclaim,
You are mad!
Hiram smiled and said,
It may be, but since it causes me no suffering or ill effect, I shall not bother myself to be concerned.
and